Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 14, which looks at burglary, home invasions, thefts, and white-collar offenses. With these offenses, there's not a whole lot of psychology behind them in terms of motivating factors. Motivation for most of these crimes typically tends to be financial. So when we look at property crimes, and these statistics are from the Uniform Crime Report for the year 2013, you can see that we have a lot of property offenses that take place every year, and that includes larceny theft, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And again, if we had to look at the psychology behind most of the property offenses, it's going to be financial. Now, there are always some exceptions to that, and arson tends to be a category where there might be some other motivations other than simply financial motivations. Let's talk about burglary first. Burglary is unlawful entry of a structure with or without force, with intent to commit a felony or theft. The FBI classifies burglary into three categories. The first is forcible entry. The second is unlawful entry where no force is used. And number three is attempted forcible entry. There are 2.2 million burglaries every year in the United States. The characteristics of burglary: a third do not involve forced entry. They enter through an unlocked door or an unlocked window. 2/3 are residential: house, garage, shed. Residentials typically happen during the day, while burglaries of commercial properties and businesses tend to happen at night. They hit a peak during July and August when it's hot. People tend to leave their doors and windows open more. They tend to go on more vacations, leaving their properties vulnerable to burglars. So who are the offenders with burglary? Again, this is one of those categories where it is young males. 58% arrested in 2010 were under the age of 25. So it is a crime of young age. And again, males, 22% of arrests are under the age of 18. 84% of those arrested in 2010 were male. And again, daytime burglaries of homes are usually done during the day. And when we talk about juvenile burglaries, they're often during the day as well and associated with being out of school. So truancy from school and then burglarizing properties. Now, when burglars are selecting their target, they're looking for the greatest probability of success with the least amount of risk. So they have cues that are important for successful burglary. Ian Taylor did a study in 1998 and found that experienced burglars are for cues in 4 categories. Number 1, occupancy cues. Is anybody home? They look for piled up mail, newspapers, vehicles in the driveway, blinds open, shut, lights on or on, things like that. Wealth cues, they look for where is the house located? What's the neighborhood like? What are the make of the cars? What can you see in the house? What do the visible furniture look like? If you look through the windows, what are the visible electronics? Layout cues, house that is easy to gain access to and easy to get away from. So you wouldn't want a house deep in a neighborhood. Corner houses are easy to get in and get out of. And then security cues. Does it look like there's an alarm system, locks on the doors, security deadbolts? Do they have pets? That's another one. So corner single-family homes are high targets, and isolated homes are also high targets. So not homes in the middle of a street on a tract neighborhood generally in terms of being selected for easy entry to and easily to get away from. Most burglaries are well planned. They spend time looking for targets by looking at the surveillability cues, how much cover to get in and out, all those occupancy cues that we talked about. Do they have dogs? Do they have alarm systems? Those are the biggest deterrents, by the way, even small dogs and home alarm systems. They look for entry strategies. So looking at deadbolts, security locks, those tend to pose the biggest problems. Sliding glass doors are easy because they can be quietly taken off. Windows, easy. They tend to be left unlocked or are easy to break the locks on windows, or even to break small window panes to reach in and open them. Bump keys, these are interesting. These are brass keys that fit into most standard locks, and through pin manipulation. They're used by locksmiths, but are often used by burglars as well. So they get these bump keys that allow them to kind of get into any lock. They are made by lock manufacturers to fit most popular locks. Of course, they're made for locksmiths, but offenders get their hands on those. So how far do burglars travel? Most take place in 1 mile of the offender's home, especially with residential burglars. With commercial burglars, they're willing to travel a little bit farther, but they tend to hit homes and businesses that are fairly close to where they live. We can use geographical profiling, by the way, which we talked about in a previous chapter, especially if we have a serial burglar, to kind of map out where the homes and businesses are that they are targeting, and then get an idea of where they might live. When it comes to gender differences, patterns are similar for males and females, although males are more likely to steal cars as well as burglarize businesses on their own. With females, they generally fall into 2 categories: accomplices, they follow the orders of a male, or being a partner. So males are more likely to do it on their own. Females are more likely to work with a male. So what is the motivation for burglaries? Motivation is, number one, is monetary gain. High return and low risk is what they're looking for. Self-satisfaction, repeat burglary. They burglarize the same place because of efficiency, planning, and risk, meaning the same neighborhood. Property typically taken when somebody burglarizes a home includes jewelry, valuable household ornaments, items, laptops, tablets, electronics, of course, tools, anything that can easily be resold and that has value. And of course, money as well. A lot of people do keep money in their homes, but anything that can be sold really quickly and easily for value, for money. Again, the motives are typically monetary gain. We don't see a lot of psychology behind this, except for the idea of self-satisfaction. All right. Michael Vaughan in 2008 created a typology on burglars, and this was based off of a sample of 456 adult career criminals. And it was based on the motives and the type of burglars. So the first was young, versatile, and this is the most common category, according to Vaughan, with 60% of all burglars falling under this. They are young, and the motivation is simply profit. 2, vagrant, 22% fall into this category. According to Vaughan, burglary stems from transient vagabond lifestyle, looking for money. 3, drug-oriented, and 15% fall into this category. They have a drug history and more likely to carry a weapon, and the motive is to get money to support a drug habit. And then 4, sexual predator, only 6%, thank goodness, fall into this category. But this is the one that we would worry about a lot, because they could be potentially the most violent type. They tend to have a long criminal career with antisocial behavior. They're motivated, at least in part, by sexual compulsion to enter buildings occupied by others, can involve sexual assault, and accounts for the vast majority of violence that is associated with burglary. Now, Fox and Farrington, they also came up with a burglary typology in 2012, and this is based on crime scenes. So number one, opportunistic, is not planned, tends to be a messy crime scene, leaving a lot of evidence behind. So it was just an opportunity that arose, and an offender took advantage of that. 2, organized. The crime scene is clearly indicates that the crime was clearly planned. They bring their own tools. They don't leave a lot of evidence behind. Everything's pretty clean. Disorganized, probably opportunistic, not planned. They leave a mess behind, a lot of evidence. And interpersonal is harming, or at least trying to harm someone within the home or to scare them. It's a pretty simple typology, but again, it's based on looking at the evidence at the crime scene, where the first typology was based on the motives and type of burglars. Now, the psychological impact on victims. Impact is highest when homes are burglarized. Victims often feel distress, loss of control, anger, fear, depression, anxiety. It really does invade make you feel violated in terms of your private areas, and your private space has been violated, and it it makes people feel like their sense of control, because we all feel like we're safe and in control to some extent in our homes. So it endangers a person's sense of control. It makes them feel like they might not be able to protect themselves in their home. And burglars can intend to produce that kind of response. Some of them again, we talked about how there's not a lot of psychology behind burglary, but sometimes they actually are trying to induce a sense of terror in their victims when they're invading their home. A home invasion is any crime committed by an individual unlawfully entering a residence while someone is at home. It is not a separate category in the Uniform Crime Report. Roughly 20% of household burglaries result in violent victimization, like a simple assault. In the vast majority of cases, the burglar does not realize somebody is at home. Now, there, of course, are cases where they do know somebody's home and the home invasion was planned, but the vast majority is not planned, and they intend to burglarize a home not realizing that somebody is in the house. But if somebody is inside, it is called a home invasion. All right, larceny and motor vehicle theft. Larceny does not involve unlawful entry into a property. It is things like pickpocketing, purse snatching, shoplifting, but it is not breaking into an entry. It's still removing property, taking property that is not yours. It just doesn't involve breaking into a particular home or business. So shoplifting would qualify going into an open store and stealing things out of that store. Motor vehicle theft is stealing a car. So theft or attempted theft of a motor vehicle, including cars, buses, motorcycles, scooters. 82% of vehicle thefts in 2010 involved males as the perpetrators. Sometimes it is taking keys for vehicles. Sometimes it is breaking into cars. Carjacking is a completed or attempted theft of a motor vehicle by force or threat of force when somebody is either in or by their own car. Force or threat of force against occupant of vehicle is how it differs from motor vehicle theft. So motor vehicle theft is taking a car that nobody is in, near, or around. Carjacking was somebody is in their car and involves force. There are dozens of homicides associated each year with carjacking. Victims tend to be male and African American. Most take place at night. 93% of the offenders are male, and we're talking about carjacking. And of course, motor vehicle theft it's a property crime. It doesn't involve, threat to people or any harm to people, where carjacking is more dangerous. Identity theft. Identity theft is when somebody uses fraud or deception for the purposes of obtaining illegal financial gain. And that involves fraud and identity theft. It can involve misrepresentation of facts, the deliberate intent to deceive. Examples include identity theft, and that is stealing your personal information. Mail fraud, bank fraud, counterfeiting, also corporate or organizational wrongdoings. Identity theft, we're all at high risk for identity theft today. It's really a big issue, especially with all the technology we have. One individual or group of individuals misappropriate another person's personal identification or information, like your social security number, your date of birth, your mother's maiden name, etc., to either take over your identity, usually for the purposes of opening credit cards, mortgages, purchase cars, etc. In 2007, 7%, and that is 8 million households, had one member who was the victim of some form of identity theft. Credit card is the most common form, followed by checking or debit accounts. I'll tell you a story. My husband was at a gas station, and just a regular, Shell gas station. He slid his card out by the pump to get gas. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A couple hours later, he got a phone call from the credit card company saying that somebody was at the mall across the street using his credit card in stores. They had uh, uh, somehow gained access to that card slider and were able to make a credit card within an hour and be at a mall in 2 hours using his credit card information. Thieves are really incredible with the technology that they use. Social media has added to the problem because a lot of us share information on our social media sites, like our date of birth, our home address, our phone number, our mother's maiden name. Recently, there were people posting the year that they graduated from high school online on social media, so you could see what year somebody graduated from high school. One study found that 68% of people shared their birthday information online, 63% their high school name, 18% their phone number. We share a lot of information online that can allow people to, steal our information. We need to be really careful with that. So again, it includes credit card theft, checking your debit accounts, cell phone accounts, getting information from deceased individuals, getting information from children, using it's called child identity theft, and it's difficult but not impossible to get the social number and date of birth of children or deceased individuals to open accounts and create an identity. Kids in foster care tend to be vulnerable for this. All right, shoplifting is a form of larceny theft that accounts for about 17.2% of all larceny thefts. It's highly underreported. 1 in 10 Americans admit to shoplifting at some point, and it occurs across all socioeconomic status and is actually more common among higher educated people. So who shoplifts? Well, juveniles, first of all. Shoplifting is most common referral to the juvenile court system for those under the age of 15. As children get older, the number of shoplifting incidents does tend to decline. Many suggest this is due to moral development, which tends to take place during the teenage years. Adults and juveniles who shoplift are less likely to view it as bad or dishonest, as wrong. Those are kind of those techniques of neutralizing things. So techniques of neutralization are often used to rationalize behavior and minimize any bad feelings. The store can afford it. I'm not hurting anybody. This is a big chain. They have millions of dollars. It's too expensive. All of those kinds of things. Most, especially adults who continue to shop, most people stop in their teenage years, but adults that tend to continue do tend to have impulse control problems and self-regulation regulation problems. Research does suggest that males are more likely to shoplift than women. Shoplifting gets, a fair amount of research in the criminal justice system, but not a lot of research in psychology. Boomer and Rosenbaum found that shoplifters tend to have extreme nervousness, behavioral patterns of walking up and down aisles, looking up for merchandise often, leaving and returning to store. There was a book written by Mary Cameron in 1964 that classified burglars into 2 categories: boosters and snitches. Boosters are those who are there for financial gain, kind of professional shoplifters, if you will. They steal stuff and resell it. Snitchers take items here and there. Snitches, I'm sorry, take items here and there. The motives for shoplifting, for juveniles, it tends to be peer pressure. It can also be economic considerations. They want certain clothing or certain items and they can't afford them. For some, it's related to self-esteem. And again, a lot of people use those neutralizing techniques and don't consider it as being morally wrong. Now, they have done some research into the types of shoplifters. Caputo and King in 2011 research on shoplifting as an occupation based on small sample of 12 women who viewed shoplifting as a way to make money or support their drug habits. Kleptomania, that's what we're looking at here. This is a a behavioral disorder that is listed in the DSM. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is rare, but it is an anxiety disorder where people feel irresistible impulse or urge to steal, and it helps them to deal with anxiety or depression. Again, it's considered to be statistically rare, and there's a lot of debate on that particular diagnosis. The vast majority of shoplifters are amateurs. Moore in 1984 did a study. He looked at 300 convicted shoplifters, found that 56% were amateurs. It wasn't something they did as a profession. 11% were semi-professionals, 17% had mental or emotional issues, and 15% were impulse shoplifters. Soft lifting, by the way, is a kind of a newer term, and that's soft lifting instead of shoplifting. It's a legal duplication of copyrighted software by individuals for personal use. It results in $11 billion in revenue losses every year. And by the way, with shoplifting, that is also billions of dollars of losses every year. With shoplifting, stores are taking, they use a lot of different measures to try to keep people from shoplifting. You've all seen the tags that are put on clothing. There are other tags that are put that have kind of a strip on them that are put on things like shoes and housewares. And if you go through the detectors, when you leave a store, they go off. So that has cut down on shoplifting, but people still get away with those things. And you can actually go on YouTube and look at how to take those tags off. So people do find ways around that, even though the technology has changed and made it a little bit more difficulty. All right, when it comes to white collar and occupational crime, white collar crime is a term that was coined by Edward Sutherland in 1939 to describe a crime committed by a person of responsibility and high social status in the course of their occupation. This definition was a bit vague, and so more recent theorists have attempted to improve Sutherland's original idea. Clennard and Quinley in 1980 came up with two concepts. One, occupational crime. This is crime that's committed by an individual for their own profit with their occupation, with their work. And then corporate crime. This is committed by a corporation through its agents or its actions. Green in 1997 came up with a typology designed to help clarify the distinction, the different problems associated with that broad definition of white collar crime. So he has organizational, professional, state authority, or individual. So again, organizational would be a whole organization is committing some type of crime with their business practices. Professional, again, that would be kind of similar to the occupational crime. That's by an individual for profit in their profession. State authority would be, some type of state authority that is using the authority that they have to commit crimes. And then individual would be similar to professional, where it's one person stealing from an organization, typically. All right, corporate crime is individuals within the organization are making decisions that render the corporate behavior a crime. Highly publicized economic crimes, for example. Again, not a lot of psychology behind when we talk about white collar or corporate crime. The vast majority of people and organizations who are committing this type of crime are doing it for profit. The prevalence, it's difficult to measure because the Uniform Crime Report does not report on whether or not a crime was related to occupation. It also is highly underreported category. Many people are fired with no charges instead of the crime being reported. So it often involves civil suits instead of criminal charges. There is something called the National White Collar Crime Center. It is a nonprofit out of Richmond, Virginia, which has attempted to collect more accurate data. They also do training and create publications on educating corporations and individuals on what corporate crime is. Corporate crime is any criminal offense committed by a corporation, includes things like price fixing, false advertising, securities fraud, environmental crimes, health crimes. The financial toll is estimated to be between 20 and 40 billion every year when it comes to occupational crime. And again, we do find those cognitive justification and neutralizations, which allow those in charge to neutralize and justify their own behavior, believing that what they do supports their organization, it's justified, it's rationalized, they're not hurting anybody. But the truth is, there's an estimated 100,000 deaths per year that could be contributed to willful violation of occupational health laws, 20 million injuries each year from defective products, tainted food, tainted drugs. So even though people use justification and neutralizing strategies, it's billions of dollars of damage every year, along with people being hurt and even people being killed. Individual occupational crime, the offender is guided primarily by his or her own personal justification and reasoning. Somebody like Bernie Madoff, political crimes. This is somebody usually doing it themselves. It's not necessarily the organization. It is somebody at the individual doing this. And again, the motivation is typically financial. Employee theft, this is illegal behavior at the workplace where employee steals from employer. It costs companies anywhere between $5 and $10 billion every year. It can include actual theft, like taking property, drugs, alcohol on the job, fraudulent behavior, calling in sick. A 1983 survey of employees found that 47 manufacturing and service organizations found that a third of the people admitted to stealing at least some type of company property. It can include internet, electronic payments. Offenders tend to be younger, unmarried, male employees. Tends to be dissatisfaction with job, and if there are group norms among employees where stealing stuff is kind of seen as being okay and even kind of a norm with the group, then people are more likely to engage in that type of behavior. All right, fairly simple chapter with this one, again, because when we're talking about property crimes, we don't see a lot of motivation behind these in terms of psychology other than really financial gain. But if you have any questions on anything in this chapter, let me know. There is some information in D2L on carjacking, identity theft, and phishing for your personal information. So if you have any questions on anything, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.